The Lunaverse by by-Pdan. Episode 19, A Chance Encounter by Handy853 and insertauthor here. Chapter 1. At the moment, there was only one thing going through Spike's mind. Breakfast. Or maybe it was lunch. He wasn't exactly sure what part of the day it was. He didn't know how long he had slept since he didn't have a way to keep time. And he was in a forest where the trees were too thick to see more than a few patches of sky. For all he knew, it could actually be closer to dinner. Though he was pretty sure it wasn't that late yet. But it didn't make that much of a difference to him. All he knew was that the most delicious-looking emerald he had ever laid eyes sat in his hands. He had found it in the cave he slept in the night before, just lying there, half covered in dirt, but still shining dimly in the darkness. There's nothing in the world Spike loved to eat more than gems. They were so much better than anything else available to him. Unlike rocks, they actually had tasted them. They were so much more filling than the plants and fruits Zecora used to give him. To be honest, the abundance of gems had been one of the only good things about living in Celestia's, no, Corona's palace. But now that he was back to living in the wilderness, gems were rare. The few he had managed to take with him when he ran away had been eaten up within the first 2 days. Back before Corona had returned, any gem Spike found usually didn't last longer than a few minutes. That was how long he had expected any future gems to last. In this case, he didn't eat the emerald immediately, because he didn't have a bush of berries only a little while before. He knew that it was smarter to wait until he was hungrier to eat. So instead of munching on the gem, Spike had simply to sleep in the cave after pulling some leaves inside to make it more comfortable. But now it was morning, or afternoon, and Spike was wide awake, ready to enjoy some tasty emerald. He brought it outside, held it up against the thin ray of sunlight that had managed to slip past the thick foliage. The emerald gleamed brilliantly in the light, practically blinding Spike. The baby dragon closed his eyes and prepared to take a giant bite out of the gem, already savoring its undoubtedly delicious taste. As he was about to take that first bite, a mind-numbing screech came out of nowhere, and he felt the emerald wrench itself out of his hands. Spike's eyes opened, and he turned his head just in time to see a large red bird fly away with the still gleaming emerald in its talons, and sparks spreading out behind it. He spent a moment staring after it, not quite believing what just happened. Oh, come on! My little pony, ah, my little pony, red shit never meant that much to me, my little pony, but you're all here now, I can see, stormy weather, lots of sound, a musical bond with loving care, teaching laughter, it's an easy feat, and magic makes it all complete, you have my little ponies, how did I ever make so many true friends? You're watching The Lunaverse, created by by-Pdan, read by martial art fruit user. It can happen only on the hub. Presented by Hasbro. Brought to you by Ace Wild Stereos. Yes, we can go louder. Stupid bird. Spike muttered under his breath. A fair amount of time had passed since the bird, he was pretty sure it was a phoenix, had stolen the emerald. A young dragon had spent all that time searching for it. He tried chasing it at first, but the phoenix had quickly flown out of sight. Not all surprising considering it had wings, and all Spike had was a pair of stubby little legs. This would have happened if Z was still around. Z would have helped me chase it down, he said, even though he knew it wasn't true. Spike's former companion, Zecora the zebra, would have probably laughed if she had been around to see a phoenix swipe the emerald. Nessie would have taken the time to explain to Spike, in rhyme, why he should have been keeping an also eye on his surroundings, and that his failure to do so was the reason he lost his meal. Then Spike would have said that was stupid, that it was the bird's fault, while silently admitting to himself that she was right. But Spike was happier thinking that she should have let him ride her as she chased down at top speed until he could grab it out of the bird's talons. Young Dragon let out a sigh as he thought of his friend. His time with Zecora had been the best of his life, and not just because he had difficulty remembering anything before meeting her. It wasn't that he couldn't remember anything from that time. since there was nothing worth remembering about it. Back then, he only ate, slept, and stayed in caves. He was pretty sure he was hatched in. It was a boring life. With Z, every day had been an adventure. From the time they met and she cured him of that stupid poison joke, to the time those diamond dogs had captured her and he tricked them into letting her go. Or even just the times when they sat around the campfire, and she would tell him countless stories. It was a fun and exciting life. Until Zecora finally achieved what she came to Equestria to do in the first place, and successfully freed her. The annoyed look on Spike's face morphed into a furious one as he thought of Corona. That insane alicorn ruined everything. To be honest, Spike had never quite believed there was an alicorn trapped in the sun, or that her younger sister Luna raised the sun and moon every day and night. The tides seemed ridiculous to him. But the way Zecora used to talk about the great sun spirit, so full of wonder and excitement, eventually convinced Spike to look forward to her return, if only to have another connection to his first and only friend. Then Corona, or as he preferred to be called, Celestia, had actually shown up and proceeded to almost incinerate Z before forcing Spike to grow into a mindless animal, nearly kill the ponies who were only trying to save their friends and loved ones. It didn't take Spike long after that to decide he hated Corona almost as much as he feared her. That horrible, ungrateful monster had reduced him nothing more than a mindless tool. There had been no warning, nothing to indicate she was going to do to him beyond that terrifying smile she had before changing him. He shivered at the memory. For a brief moment, the little purple dragon wondered why he stayed in that creepy palace for so long, why he hadn't run away months ago. But he already knew the answer. He just hadn't wanted to lose his only friend, and he wasn't sure if he had made the right choice, if being completely alone was really better than being stuck with an insane alicorn. Before he could torture himself with more unpleasant thoughts, Spike heard another screech from behind a group of bushes. He quickly broke off into a run and barreled right through the bushes to catch sight of the phoenix, just as it flew off into the trees, leaving another wave of sparks in its wake. Spike let out another angry sigh. He didn't like phoenixes, not since Corona had sent him and Z to find one and bring it back so he could have a pet. And over a week of searching, they found only one, and it led them on a chase that lasted days. Those darn firebirds just seemed to revel in messing with anything that crossed their path. This phoenix, however, seemed to have gotten bored a lot more easily than the last one. As the Spike examined the clearing behind it, he quickly saw that it had left the emerald and had stolen behind, nestled cozily in a tree branch. Yes! He whispered excitedly to himself as he rushed over to the tree. He quickly dug into the wood with his claws and began climbing up. Climbing trees wasn't difficult when you had claws, but it was a tall tree, and Spike's limbs were very short. It took him a while to make his way to the branch. When the young dragon was about 3/4 of the way to the branch, he suddenly heard a sharp gasp, accompanied by the sound of bushes rustling. Spike froze and turned his head away from the tree, trying what seemed to make a sound. He eyed every plant he could find. "Is someone there?" he called out. When no one answered, he called out again. "Is that you, Z?" Spike wasn't sure how he would feel if it actually was Zecora. As much as he would like to see his friend again, he knew she would probably want to take him back to Corona, which he definitely didn't want. Once again, no one answered him, and Spike decided it must have been his imagination. He returned to climbing the tree, and before long found himself balancing on the branch that held his emerald. It wasn't a particularly wide branch, so Spike had to be careful as he slowly made his way across. As he came to the edge of the branch, he reached out to grab the emerald. At this point, it was definitely closer to lunch than it was to breakfast, and Spike was starving. His mouth was watering as he took hold of the emerald. He lifted it above his head. The young dragon decided not to waste any time, and immediately moved to eat the gem. But before he could take his first bite, he heard the phoenix cry out again. It was surprisingly loud, and the sudden noise surprised Spike, and made him lose his balance on the tree branch. He cried out as he fell toward the ground, too caught up in the moment to remember he was a dragon, and would probably be fine when he hit the ground. A few feet away from crashing into the dirt, Spike abruptly stopped in midair. He continued screaming for a few seconds before he noticed he wasn't moving. Young Dragon blinked as he realized he had been enveloped in a glowing purple aura, similar to the one that surrounded him when Corona would grab hold of him. A cold pit formed in his stomach as he struggled against whatever was holding him, but it didn't do him any good. No matter how hard he kicked and squirmed in the air, he didn't move an inch. Okay, seriously, who's there? This isn't funny! Let me go! The purple dragon struggled for a little while longer, before he finally got up. He let an annoyed huff and crossed his arms, hoping that whoever or whatever had him would eventually decide itself, or herself, or himself. Seriously, who had him? His question was answered moments later, just as Spike realized he had dropped the emerald. A female unicorn walked out of the bushes he had seen earlier, eyeing him carefully, as if she was trying to figure out where she had seen him before. Maybe she was worried that he would break out of her grip and attack her. He could probably breathe fire at her, but decided to wait. After all, this pony had saved his life. Maybe she would be friendly. But as the purple-colored mare circled him, still looking at him with an appraising eye, he realized that he kind of doubted. Spike cast a sigh of humor as he passed him. Looked like an exploding purple star, and he wondered what that said about her. Was she about to explode at him? Twice? Eventually, she stopped right in front of his face and looked right into his eyes. Then slowly, the questioning look on her face morphed into a smug one. Spike was suddenly reminded of a certain alicorn he had come to know far too well. He did his best to hide his growing unease, but he was pretty sure that he failed as the creepy smile spread across her face. Hello, Spike. Chapter 2. Spike had no earthly idea how the purple unicorn knew his name, and for a brief moment he considered denying who he was and trying to pass himself off as some other purple and green baby dragon. But looking at that giant smile spread across her face, continued Spike that he was the best course of action was just play along with whoever he was. I'm crazy was practically written all over her face, and over the past few months, Spike had developed a number of rules for dealing with crazy ponies. Rule number 1, do not disagree with crazy ponies. Hi, he said nervously, a sheepish look spreading across his face. The unicorn's smile somehow managed to grow even more. Spike found himself wondering how it would still fit on her face. It was already close to reaching her ears. Thanks for catching me. That would have been really painful if you hadn't been around. Spike paused to give the unicorn a chance to respond. She didn't. Instead, she walked back toward the bushes she had originally come from, telekinetically pulling Spike along with her. I don't mean to be rude, but who are you? The unicorn briefly paused and turned back around. My name is Twilight Sparkle, she said proudly, before turning back toward the bushes. Young Dragon grew even more and more worried with every passing second. Well, Twilight, thanks again. Could you set me down now? I'm getting kind of nauseous. Twilight chuckled lightly in response, as he flipped him right side up, thoroughly creeping Spike out. No. She raised the bush and began rummaging through the leaves, apparently looking for something. Why not? A hint of annoyance was starting to creep into his nervous voice. Who the heck did this pony think she was? Twilight pulled out what looked like a potato sack out of the bushes. She took a moment to inspect the shack, apparently searching for any damage, before wrapping herself in it. Spike realized it was a cloak, while Twilight turned back to face him once again. Because you're Spike, companion to Zecora the Zebra and subordinate to Corona, Tyrant Sun. That's not true! Spike shouted. He hadn't run away for Corona, just to end up captured by some pony who didn't know how much he hated her. At the same time, he wondered how well she knew all of that. Was this unicorn a friend of the ponies he and Zecora had met? The ones that he used those element thingies to take Corona down in a dozen notches? Probably not. Those ponies were nice. They would have let him go by now, instead of hanging him in the air. Well, okay, they'd probably be angry with him for helping Z to try and trap them. He was pretty sure Raindrops would hit him. But at least he would let him stay on the ground. Twilight's smug grin vanished, as he recoiled from the intensity of his response. But she quickly regained her composure, and stood up straight and looked indignantly into Spike's eyes. Of course it is! I know what I'm talking about! I've read reports sent to high-ranking members of the Night Court of what happened during Corona's return. They may have come from unreliable sources, but they all mention a purple and green baby dragon who travels with a zebra named Zecora. In all recorded history, no pony has ever seen a baby dragon within the borders of Equestria until that night. The odds of another baby dragon, let alone one of the same coloration as you, being in Equestria at the same time are astronomically low. And furthermore, okay, fine! Spike interrupted before she could go into full-on rant. Rule number 4 for dealing with crazy ponies. Do not let them rant. Once they got that ball rolling, nothing can stop them. All of that is true, he admitted, but I'm not with Corona anymore. Right now, I'm getting as far away from that nut job as I can. As he finished talking, Twilight rolled her eyes. Oh, please. Do you honestly expect me to believe that? Yes! Well, I don't. You clearly just made that up, so I will let you go. You're going to have to come up with something better than that if you want to fool me. I don't have to come up with anything better that's true. Spike said as calmly as he could force himself to the ground, though he couldn't keep the undercurrent of rage out of his voice. He would have liked to yell, but before he could remember rule number 3, do not let a crazy pony see how angry you are. Twilight only let out an impervious huff. Well, I'm sorry, but that lie is just too convenient. The truth is that I caught you, and now you're making up whatever you can to get me to let you go. It's as simple as that. You've been with Corona for months. According to the reports I've read, you were traveling with Zecora far longer than that, as far as back as you can remember, in fact. You actually expect me to believe you just leave, when the facts indicate you have nowhere else to go? Spike was silent for a long moment, as he turned his eyes away from hers, and tried very, very hard to ignore that part. Yes? He finally answered. But at this point, he knew it was pointless. The unicorn wasn't going to believe anything he said, and he was doomed to be her prisoner. It was like he really had made a mistake in running away. Twilight, oblivious to the effect her words had on the baby dragon, only smirked in response. Well, Spike didn't say anything else, so he turned towards the emerald that had gotten to Spike the whole mess in the first place. He used her magic to pick it up and shove it into Spike's arms. Now, before we get moving, you're going to have to tell me. Where is Corona? Spike blinked. What? He grabbed the emerald hard enough for his claws to start scratching the surface. In the back of his mind, Spike cursed himself. He was starting to show fear. Rule number 2 for dealing with crazy ponies was similar to rule number 3. Do not let a crazy pony know you're afraid. It had always been by far the most difficult rule to follow, because Spike was absolutely terrified of Corona. And this pony actually wanted to find her? Why the heck would a pony, who had previously been taught to fear the Tyrant Sun since foalhood, want to find her? Did Twilight Sparkle want to find Corona for the same reason Z had? Did she actually want to serve her? I heard what you said! A sudden screech interrupted Spike's panicked thoughts, while preventing Twilight from responding. They turned to see that the phoenix had returned. Perched on the branch it had planted the emerald in. It looked like it was watching them. Spike turned back to Twilight, who was staring at the firebird with a suspicious look on her face. Why would you want to find her? He asked nervously. Twilight took a moment to tear her gaze away from the phoenix. So I can inform the proper authorities once I hand you over to them. She answered, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. The proper authorities? Spike didn't like the sound of that. Yes, Spike, the proper authorities, she said with an annoyed voice. The royal guard would be the most preferable, but any pony who answers to Princess Luna would suffice. I suppose you don't have to tell me, because telling them where I found you would most likely be enough of a clue to finding her on their own. They will most likely be able to convince you to tell them anyway. But I prefer to... Spike stopped listening. He just couldn't bring himself to care about what she was saying. Nor could he stop the look of terror from spreading across her face. Princess Luna was Corona's sister. The other alicorn. That one manipulated her subjects from the shadows of the night for her own amusement. The second to last person in the world he wanted to meet. No! Spike said suddenly, interrupting Twilight's rant. Twilight looked at him in confusion. Excuse me? Rule number 2 suddenly became very easy to follow, even as number 3 became impossible. The anger and frustration in Spike's voice was palpable as he responded to the purple unicorn. I did run away from one insane alicorn, just so I can end up in front of the other one! Princess Luna isn't insane! I don't care! I've been through enough! I've been turned into a mindless monster, I've been stuck with an insane alicorn that kept threatening to annihilate me, and I've had to leave behind my only friend to get away! I'm not going to let you drag me all the way to the second to last place I want to go! Spike wasn't exactly where Canterlot, the equestrian capital he knew Luna ruled from, was. But he knew that it was far away. They were somewhere up north, near the Griffin Kingdoms. Of Griffinstone. And he was going to have some Griffinstones. That joke was coming. Canterlot was at least halfway across the country. Spike did not want to end up there. Especially if this pony would be the one bringing him. The phoenix screeched again. But Spike barely heard it, too focused on glaring at the purple unicorn. Twilight, for her part, merely stood there, staring blankly at him. She seemed to be thinking how exactly she should respond. But that indecision eventually vanished when Twilight frowned and glared back at Spike. "Well, too bad!" she yelled with ferocity equal to Spike's. "You're not the only one who's been through enough. I spent the last 2 months running from the law, which includes my brother for trying to expose a fraud. Delivering you to Princess Luna will lead to my exoneration, and nothing is going to stop me!" Spike didn't know what exoneration meant, and he didn't care. At this point, he was only seeing red. Too angry to care about anything she had to say. He could feel the purple aura that kept him in the air beginning to tighten. "I'm not going!" he screamed. "Yes, you are!" she screamed back. "No, I am not!" "Well then, how are you going to get away?" Twilight smirked. It didn't take a genius to figure out there was no way she was going to let go of him. "Like this!" Spike threw the emerald at her face. It was a large gem, almost a half the size of its head. The spike was only a few feet from her. It hit her right underneath her horn, right above the space between her eyes. Twilight cried out as the pin and the emerald bounced off of her and landed next to her. But she didn't let control of the magic. Spike remained in the air. "Ha!" she yelled as she realized this. "I'm not letting you get away!" The phoenix once again let out an ear-splitting screech as it dove towards her. Twilight managed to turn her head, just to see it as it fell over her, grabbing at the emerald. The embers that fell out of its wing flared out everywhere. Since he was a dragon, the embers didn't bother Spike at all. It could easily take on extreme heat and be perfectly fine. Heck, Corona had even thrown him into the lava her palace hung over once or twice. Twilight's cloak seemed to be just fine as well. Spike guessed it was enchanted to take more punishment than most cloth was. Twilight herself, however, had no such protective enchantment, and the few embers that landed right in her face made her scream out in pain. That did it. The purple aura surrounding Spike vanished as Twilight took a few steps backwards, rubbing at the burning embers buried in her snoot. The phoenix took off, the emerald once again in its talons. Spike took the opportunity to dive into the bushes and make a break for it. He didn't really have a concrete idea on where he was going, beyond get away from Twilight as far as possible. But that was easy enough. He could still hear her cursing as he recovered from the light burns. Then again, he wasn't exactly being quiet himself as he tore through the bushes and ran over broken twigs and leaves. Once Twilight took hold of her senses, she'd probably be able to track him down pretty easily. Spike was too small to outrun a full-grown pony. Nevertheless, the young dragon did his best to make his way through the forest as quickly as possible, avoiding anything that looked like a path, taking random turns all over the place. It didn't take long for the sounds of Twilight's yelling to be replaced by the sounds of a very determined pony rushing through the thick foliage. Spike gulped when he realized that the sounds were following him pretty accurately, and that they were getting closer. Before she could catch up to him, Spike caught sight of a tree that had some very strange roots. Some of them had grown above ground, and in such a way they intertwined with another, forming a kind of wooden web. The space between them, each branch, looked like it was just wide enough for a creature of Spike's size to fit in and hide. He frantically went off in the opposite direction and hid behind an ordinary tree. Hiding in that weird mass of roots was just too obvious. She was certain to look for him there. Plus, there was probably already something living inside. As he sat between some of the roots that were partially showing above ground, he struggled to catch his breath and quiet himself before he caught up to him. He didn't have to wait long, as he heard Twilight burst into the clearing, only a few minutes later, just as he managed to get his breathing under control. Spike couldn't look around the tree, in case she was looking in that direction, but he could hear her well enough. So he stopped in the clearing, apparently because the Lunaverse hated Spike, and told her that he was hiding nearby. He listened intently to what Twilight was doing. From what he could tell, the first things he did was walk over to the strange formation of roots. Suddenly, the shadow of the trees and plants everywhere lengthened in the direction opposite of the root formation. It was fairly obvious that the unicorn was creating light to see inside. Actually, Spike, you wound up in a portal and you accidentally wound up into my variation universe. See, now you're talking to Twilight that can control plants. Don't worry, you'll be given to Rarity, who'll treat you like a son for a bit. So, hey, points for you, huh? Suddenly, an angry roar tore through the air, accompanied by a surprised yelp from Twilight. Scared, Spike briefly stood and looked around the tree. He saw Twilight sitting on her rump, backing away while staring at the root formation, too shocked to turn around and see Spike. Looking into the roots, the baby dragon saw two green eyes glowing out of the darkness. A low growl emanated from the roots that lasted until the eyes vanished. It looked like Spike had been right about something being alive in there. "Okay, he's out of there!" Twilight muttered from her sitting position, making Spike realize how close he was to her. But there are no signs of destruction among the foliage, which means he's somewhere around here. The young dragon quickly moved back into hiding behind a tree, hoping she didn't hear him move. He struggled to remain quiet as still as possible, was back up against the tree, and claws digging into the bark. "So all I need to do is..." "What? What does he need to do?" There was an unbelievably long moment of silence as Spike held his breath, wondering what his pursuer was about to do. His question was answered after what seemed like an eternity of waiting. Then he noticed that everything had a certain distance away seemed to take on a purplish hue. The leaves, the wood, the dirt, half the world suddenly seemed to turn purple. The other half closer to Spike, remained the same. Then slowly, Spike's half of the world began to turn purple as well. The foreign color was enveloping everything at a fairly slow pace, until Spike realized it was some kind of wall or force field. Twilight had created some kind of purple force field all within a certain distance, and was shrinking. Soon, it would be close enough to trap Spike against a tree trunk. She was trying to trap him. No, that wasn't right. She already had trapped him. She just hadn't seen that yet. There was no way for Spike to escape the shrinking force field. Unless, as the purple field made its way to Spike, the young dragon did the only thing he could. He took in a deep breath, for as long as he could. Once he pulled in as much air as possible, he held it in his lungs for a few minutes. When the force field was close enough, he exhaled in a vicious burst of green flame. She had always told him that dragon fire had strange properties, that it was somewhat magical in nature. In the past, she even used it to send messages to Corona, who would send her own back through. She had also told him that dragons were usually somewhat resistant to external magic, that dragon fire should be able to burn through magical things. They never had a chance to test whether or not that was true, but Spike really didn't have much of a choice at the moment. He kept his green flames going as long as he could, which wasn't much longer than a few seconds. Exhausted, Spike looked to see as flames had in fact managed to burn a hole in the force field. An extremely small hole. An extremely small hole that he had absolutely no chance to fit through. "Oh, come on!" he said. "Uh-huh!" Twilight's head poked from behind a tree. Before he had a chance to react, Twilight's horn glowed, and Spike once again found himself floating in the air, surrounded by purple aura. "Gotcha!" Twilight's face was once again adorned by the impossibly smug smile. Spike could only let out an annoying grunt. Could this day get any worse?